What is going on, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here, of course, bringing you another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Of course, today, a very busy day for me. I've had a front-loaded, back-loaded schedule. So I am bringing you, of course, a pre-recorded edition of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Tonight was a tough night for me, Wednesday night at 8, due to the fact that the schedule will be released tonight. Now, I could have gone live for the schedule release, but I felt like it would have been a little bit watered down due to people watching the schedule release show, on NFL Network as well, ESPN and all that stuff. So I wanted to bring an episode just talking about the team that is my favorite team, that is your favorite team, as I like to discuss the team that is the Buffalo Bills on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. So a lot to discuss today as we dive into the subject matter. The Buffalo Bills signing not one, not two, but three wide receivers in their last 5 signings. So I'm going to talk about those wideouts. I'm going to talk about Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I'm going to talk about Chase Claypool. And I'm going to talk about Quintez Cephus, as well as how this position breaks down. So, of course, thank you so much to the Buffalo fan base followers for tuning in to this podcast tonight, as well as every other week that you guys have tuned in. Greatly appreciate the love and support. Of course, the show sponsor is 26shirts.com. Del Reed, of course, bringing you brand new shirts, bringing you brand new hoodies, bringing you brand new Buffalo concepts for all of your apparel needs. Go to 26shirts.com today. You'll find yourself a great item. Make that happen and give back to the community in the process with a purchase at 26shirts.com. So, of course, I want you guys to still chime in and fire away in the comment section below. Although this is not a live episode, I won't be reading your comments live. I will get to your comments. I do get notified when I am live, of course. I do get notified when you guys leave comments on my podcast. So I'll be able to interact with you guys that way. You can tweet at me. Of course, you can see my Twitter there at the bottom, Ryan Thomas Take, on Twitter, or X as the kids call it these days. Love to chat with you guys and girls out there in regards to all things Buffalo Bills. Of course, a lot to discuss on this episode today. So, as I mentioned, the Buffalo Bills, they add 3 wideouts, wide receivers, of course. As I mentioned, not a big shock, right? Coming from February to March to now April, wondering how will the Buffalo Bills fill this roster? How will they fill this position, in particular, the wide receiver position? And to me, yes, the wide receiver position is Buffalo's biggest need. Yes, that was pretty obvious. That's why they went out and they drafted Keon Coleman with their first pick in the 2024 NFL draft. Not a first rounder. They traded down twice, of course, as we know, but they were able to come away with Keon Coleman with their first pick. And then they actually didn't add a wide receiver at all throughout the rest of the draft, that's where I think a lot of people are criticizing Buffalo for not doing that, for not putting an emphasis on that position enough, for not adding another wideout with another pick in another round. Can't really necessarily say that I disagree with that, but when you understand the players that Buffalo was able to draft from top to bottom, I thought they added depth everywhere. I thought they added some really good late-round players. That Van Pran-Granger is a really good one that I'm really excited about, along with Ray Davis at the running back position. So I thought they did really well overall. It was a very balanced draft. They added pretty much everywhere, offensive line, defensive line, running back, wideout. That was great to see. But also knowing Brandon Beane and looking at the track record of one Brandon Beane, understanding that, of course, Brandon Beane is going to add to the roster leading in to their 90-man training camp, where you have 90 men on your roster. You're going to try like heck to make that roster as competitive as possible so that come training camp, it is the most full throttle experience for the fans to be there, seeing guys compete. And that's what I would like to refer to as these next three signings as a way of Buffalo to be able to compete. I talked about last week the youth movement in Buffalo, which I think is very real, but I think there is something to adding bits and pieces of experience, especially to a position that is not the deepest position on the roster in that regard. You had Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, and then you tried to, add some pieces here and there, and that's what they've been able to do. And I think the experience pieces, although I should say experience, they're still pretty young. Cephas, Claypool, Valdez Scantling, still in their prime. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about Quintez Cephas first. And to me, this was a move that Brandon Beane alluded to post his NFL draft press conference. Quintez Cephas is a 26-year-old wideout out of Wisconsin. Of course, 6'1". In terms of his career, we know the most recent years. Most recently, he was banned from football for a season, suspended, I should say, indefinitely after it was discovered that he had violated the league's gambling policy by betting on NFL games. He was subsequently released by the Lions following the incident. And a year later, of course, once Quintez was reinstated by the National Football League on April 18th, April 29th, the Buffalo Bills made him an offer that he couldn't refuse. And to me, this is a do or die time in the career of Quintez Cephas. Despite him being 26 years old, he's had this on his resume of being suspended indefinitely for a year due to gambling. He's also had sexual assault allegations, of course, against him over the years as well. And those, have happened multiple times over the course of these last couple of years as legal battles have kind of mounted for him. And of course, allegations, but at the same time, not necessarily what we see typically or hear typically about Buffalo Bills players. And that's something that typically Buffalo doesn't go after the fact. If happens during their signing, like a Matt Araiza, or during their signing, during their tenure, like a Von Miller, I think that's a little bit of a different story. But with Quintez Cephas, those incidents happened in 2018, bled into 2019 as well. And, obviously he's put that behind him. But I hold out the hope that with this signing, Quintez Cephas comes to training camp full throttle, ready and raring to go, ready to compete and ready to put his best foot forward in a competitive battle at the wide receiver position. Only 26 years old. Of course, statistically, not much to speak of. Only 568 receiving yards in his career, only 4 career touchdowns, only 37 career catches. He was looked at as a wide receiver 4 or 5 on the Detroit Lions during his 3 seasons there. So plenty to prove, I think, in my humble opinion, from Quintez Cephas moving forward in this position battle. But a move, nonetheless, that Brandon Beane has dialed into that makes him feel like, okay, I added another body here, and we'll see what he can bring to the table. Give me your thoughts on Quintez Cephas. What are your thoughts on him? And we'll go to the next one. So this next receiver is somebody that I have a lot of respect for in terms of the skill set. Now, maybe I'm a little bit biased in this regard because I watched a ton of Notre Dame football games on Saturdays. It's really the only football team collegiately that I follow outside of UB. And Chase Claypool was somebody that I looked at as a great talent as far as a prospect from college football to the National Football League. So much so that, obviously the Pittsburgh Steelers felt the same way. And the Pittsburgh Steelers usually don't miss in NFL drafts. They usually hit. And in this case, it felt like in 2020, when Chase Claypool was selected, his rookie season, 873 yards, 9 touchdowns. So you'd think to yourself, okay, coming off of that rookie year, definitely a lot to like there. 21, 22, coming off of almost 1,000-yard season, almost 10 touchdowns. What could Chase Claypool provide in his second season? Second season, he starts more games, he has just as many yards, 860, but the touchdowns go down to 2, go down from 9 to 2. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers underwent a quarterback change. Big Ben was gone. and his numbers really suffered, along with the emergence of a George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, and then Pittsburgh, goes the direction of trading away Claypool to the Chicago Bears. Here I thought, okay, well, this is a better fit for Claypool. He'll be playing in Chicago. He's got Justin Fields that he needs a receiver to rely on. Thought it was actually just as good a fit to kind of give him a new lease on life, moving on from Pittsburgh, because I knew Pittsburgh would kind of take a different approach to their philosophy offensively, going from Big Ben to Kenny Pickett, more of a run team. Kenny Pickett, not one to really be able to sling the football. At any rate, Chase Claypool goes to the Chicago Bears, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, this should be a much better fit for Claypool long term, right? And the numbers never returned to the level that they needed to. 2 years in Chicago, only 5 games started, 191 yards receiving in 2 seasons combined. And then he goes to Miami. Miami, you think, okay, he's buried now. He's buried at this point, despite his youth, despite him being 24 at that time, being buried behind Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and company. So the numbers just never returned. And to me, I had hoped that they would, because I like the player a lot. I like the physical tools. I like the skill set. But the numbers were what they were. Now goes into free agency. Of course, we're in the middle of April, looking at free agents as I did. Potential free agent ads. Chase Claypool was a name that I did bring up on this podcast due to the fact that he's young, he's big, he's strong, he's fast. I think there's just a few things, X's and O's wise, that he's not as brushed up on as he needed to be. Maybe some situational awareness things as well, within the X's and O's of the game, that really came back to bite him in the butt in his tenure with Pittsburgh as well, in his tenure with Chicago. And Miami was never even really a tenure. They weren't really able to give him a chance that was a warranted chance due to the depth at the position and the players at the position that they already had. So Chase Claypool, to me, is a very interesting addition to this team. 6'4", 230 pounds, ran a 4.4 240. Of course, looking at how this addition impacts the Buffalo Bills, I don't see a downside to this addition. You look at one scenario, okay, he makes the team, plays really well in preseason, plays really well in training camp, competes his ass off, makes the 53-man roster or 75-man roster. Then preseason comes about and you're feeling really good about what he did in the preseason. He makes the 53. It's a win-win, right? 25-year-old receiver on an extreme discount, former second-round pick. But if he doesn't make the team, then what does that mean necessarily for Claypool? To me, that would mean the end. To me, that would mean CFL, USFL, XFL, maybe. That would be the next stop, and then tries to prove himself within that avenue to NFL teams. I don't think Chase Claypool was ready for that. I will say that going from Big Ben Roethlisberger to who I thought was a decent quarterback at the time in Justin Fields, who was evidently shunned by Chicago, sent packing for literally nothing, and then Tua. I've never been a big Tua guy, but they had a lot of weapons ahead of them, so that's why I talked about Miami so briefly, as I've mentioned once and twice before. Chase Claypool's never played with a quarterback like Josh Allen. So to me, that's very interesting. That's a move that I think is worth pondering, and a move worth going down that path. Low risk, high reward move that puts the Buffalo Bills, I think, in a really good spot as far as the depth that they could have at that position, as far as the competitive level that they could have at that position with the players that they've acquired in Quintez Cephus as well as Claypool. Claypool is very young. I don't think he's ready for his career to be quite over just yet. So it'll be very interesting to see what version of Chase Claypool do we see, and that version of Chase Claypool will be seen and looked at in Pittsburgh. That's the time of year where we're really going to see what Chase Claypool is all about. We're really going to see if Chase Claypool's got it or if he doesn't have it. And this was a little bit of a signing that I know Bills fans, at least on my social media, were very against it. To me, those are the same people that are saying that they want the Bills to draft a wide receiver, two of them, and they drafted one. So then they say they want the Bills to go out and sign a wide receiver. They do. And then they say that they don't like the wide receiver that the Buffalo Bills draft. So those to me are just opinions that you can never satisfy. Their tune would change if, in fact, Claypool makes the 53-man roster, if, in fact, contributes to the Buffalo Bills during the 2024-2025 season. And I think that he potentially can, if given the opportunity to show his game, play his game, and obviously taking advantage of that opportunity. So Chase Claypool, to me, I like that move a lot, but it just throws another wrench into the tool bag of this competition at the wide receiver position. Now, yesterday, the Buffalo Bills announced that they had signed a veteran wideout, a former Kansas City Chief, which makes the ears of every Bills fan perk up and say, oh, who's that former Kansas City Chief that the Buffalo Bills signed? Of course, to me, this was a name that made a lot of sense. I didn't expect MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, to be a free agent much longer. I expected him to go to, Buffalo, or I guess there was some interview talks with the Jets. There was a few other teams that had reached out, but Marquez Valdez-Scantling, to me, the skill is, in terms of size, in terms of speed, in terms of route running ability, is there. Every stop that he's made, whether it's Green Bay, whether it's Kansas City, he's made an impact. He's played with two great quarterbacks, and Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, and now he's going to play with another one in Josh Allen. So they'll have the opportunity to, at the very least. So to me, I look at MVS as a worthy investment, not just for the reasons that I talked about Claypool and Cephas as far as competition, but I look at MVS as a worthy investment in terms of, if MVS makes this team, then you're going to see and you're going to hear a lot about MVS helping other guys out. He's a leader. He's a guy that's been through quite a lot in this league, won at the highest level multiple times as well. He's lost at the highest level multiple times, dating back to those disappointing early playoff exits in Green Bay. So I think he brings quite a lot to that locker room that really needs a lot right now. You talk about the turnover. The turnover is not just inexperience on the field, but it's experience about what takes place on the field and how to react to it off the field. And I feel like Marquez Valdez-Scantling has always been somebody that's had a good head on his shoulders. There's been moments where he's had big drops in games and he bounces right back the next week. So to me, this was a really cool move by the Bills. It's a 1-year, $4.5 million deal that puts another face, puts another name in the room. Now, is this a big name? No. Is it a known name? Yes. Amongst those that are, hardcore football fanatics like myself and like yourself for the most part, right? That tune into shows like these all the time. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is somebody that I believe brings a lot to the table for this version of the Buffalo Bills. Guys like Justin Shorter could learn a lot from Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Guys like Keon Coleman could learn a lot from Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So it'll be very interesting to see if MVS can work his way to the final roster. I think he can, but you never know. That's why these moves are brought in to make this unit as good as it can be, so that the competitive level is even better. So breaking down the wide receiver room, how does this room look now that they have these three signings? There's really, to me, only three essential locks to make the 53-man roster. Three locks at the wide receiver position in Buffalo right now to make the 53-man roster. Only three. I mentioned Cephas, I mentioned Claypool, I mentioned MVS, but they're not necessarily locks to make the 53-man roster. They're going to have to compete to make that 53. So to me, when I look at this, wide receiver group, there's only three locks, and those three locks would be Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and of course, Keon Coleman. You don't draft a wide receiver in the second round for nothing, right? And I'm making, jokes here, but Curtis Samuel was a great free agent addition. I think that there's been moments where we've seen a lot of really good things from him with great quarterback play, but throughout his career, he has not had a great quarterback. And Josh Allen should elevate Curtis Samuel, the process of Samuel elevating Josh Allen. Khalil Shakir was the best wideout post week 8 on the Buffalo Bills, and that includes Stephon Diggs. So I know that they have big plans for the former 5th round pick out of Boise State. So those 3 are the main locks to make this roster for me. I will say, though, that the free agent signing of Mac Hollins was an underrated signing by the Bills. And I believe that Mac Hollins is also considered to be a lock, but more of those 3 guys being locks, I would say that Mac Hollins would be on the outside, more so lock, looking into not being a lock on this team. So Mac Hollins, he does all the dirty work. He can block, he can catch, he's big, he's strong. So to me, plays a lot of that run blocking wideout role that Gabe Davis played, and it's one that I think he'll be welcomed with open arms here for that among special teams and things like that. So that's how I see the Buffalo Bills wide receiver room as it stands right now. As the Bills get $10 million more in salary cap space post June 1st due to releasing Tre'Davious White, could we see more moves potentially? Could we see a Hunter Renfrow? Could we see a Michael Thomas? Could we see those names potentially come to Buffalo? That would be interesting. I lean on the side of no, but Brandon Beane is never done. He's never done. So when the cards are stacked against him, with training camp approaching even in June, July, they'll look to make something happen to make the team more competitive, to make the team a little bit better. But in this case, the cards have been stacked against Brandon Beane as far as the salary cap, and I feel like he's done a really good job adding to the team despite the salary cap issues that are, in the front of mind with every Bills fan right now. So greatly appreciate everybody that tuned in tonight. This was a great episode. Great to get a great episode out on a very important position. I know that a lot of Bills fans looked at the Stephon Diggs move and thought, man, I can't believe the Bills made this trade. But they did. And we're at this point now where we're embracing this youth movement. I know I am. And I know that initially when the Buffalo Bills drafted Keon Coleman, I did want Ladd McConkey, liked Coleman as a prospect, but wanted Ladd McConkey. But Buffalo goes with Keon Coleman. And then I realize I'm not just rooting for the Bills, I'm rooting for the player. I'm rooting for the guy that is Keon Coleman. So really excited for next week's show. Stay tuned. And thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on the Buffalo Fanbase Podcast Network. See you next Wednesday night.